Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. We are going to begin this morning with introductions again. My name is Brian Harper, a farmer in Junction City, Oregon, and current chair of the board. And I think we'll go to the left here to start with the director.
Alexis Taylor, ODA Director.
Luisa Santamaria, public member at Oregon State University Extension.
Miguel Lopez, public member.
Elin Miller, farmer, Umpqua, hazelnuts and wine grapes.
Stacy Simonich, Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences at Oregon State University.
Randy Savati, farmer, Ontario.
Barbara Boyer, farmer out of Yamhill County and chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Eric Orem, farmer rancher, Morrill County.
Carla Valnes, Oregon Department of Agriculture, and Chad Allen is excused today, board member Chad Allen. Shante Johnson is excused today, and Josh Zielinski is excused today.
Do introductions around the room first.
Good morning, Lauren Henderson, Deputy Director of the Department of Ag.
Tia Rodriguez, Executive Assistant for ODA.
Just Paulson, Market Access and Certification Programs for the Department of Agriculture.
Bill Miller, hazelnut grower down in Umpqua, Oregon.
Susanna Perlstein, Program Manager for the Produce Safety Program with Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Rusty Rock, Program Director for Safety Animal Health and Services Program.
Excellent. Okay, so next on the agenda, we're going to hear about the ODA Program Safety Program Overview, and that's Casey Prentice. I'm guessing he's going to be virtual. Yeah. Okay. And then Susanna Perlstein.
Thank you all. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, I can wait. Carla, we do have a few slides, but thank you very much for having myself and Casey is here with us virtually. I'm the Produce Safety Program Manager here at Oregon Department of Agriculture. And today I was hoping to chat with you a little bit about, very, very briefly, what the Food Safety Modernization Act is, what the Produce Safety Rule is related to the Food Safety Modernization Act, which I'm going to call FSMA. I'll go over some really brief updates that are relevant to all of the growers who are subject to the Produce Safety Rule. Then we'll look at what our program at ODA does. We're a non-regulatory program, and I'm going to use the term Path A frequently here. Then we'll transition and talk a little bit about our FDA produce safety rule inspections, what they've been looking like here in Oregon. We'll look at some of our neighboring states, what's going on there. And then what we're going to end and spend most of the time on is talking about what is it going to look like if we as a state decide to take on a regulatory program. And so, Carla, I believe we're on slide 3 by now. And so essentially the Food Safety Modernization Act, to give you some background, in case you haven't heard about it before or in case you just have a lot of other things to think about, which I know you do. This sets science-based minimum standards for food safety throughout the entire food chain. And so there are multiple rules that make up FSMA, with the produce safety rule being one of them. And that is the abbreviated term for the standards for growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of produce for human consumption. So that's typically food people eat raw. Next slide. And so the produce safety rule itself sets these science-based minimum standards for these activities that are covered. And when I say covered, it means subject to the rule. So it's operations that are growing, harvesting, packing, or holding produce that people, again, typically eat raw. And there are certain things that are subject to the rule, certain types of produce that are subject to the rule, and certain things that are not. For example, hazelnuts would not be subject to the rule. But the produce safety rule itself focuses on things like training and record-keeping requirements for things like worker health and hygiene, as well as agricultural water, wildlife, domesticated animals. Some operations may be using things like biological soil amendments of animal origin. Not all aspects of this rule apply to all farms that are subject to them. So a lot of farms don't use manure, for example. But the really important thing to note about the produce safety rule is, so there are a lot of farms out there that are doing third-party food safety audits. So you may have a buyer that says, okay, I'm not going to buy your product unless you do a harmonized good agricultural practices audit with a GFSI equivalency. That's okay. That's dictated by the buyer. But here with the produce safety rule, this is a federal regulation that if farms are subject to it, there is no opting out. And so that is a very key thing to keep in mind here. And so next slide, Carla. When we're talking about which farms are subject to that rule and which farms are not subject to that rule, we really focus on three basic questions. The first one is what is being grown, and you can expand this to what is being grown, harvested, packed, or held. So those activities that could be subject to the rule. Because again, if somebody's doing all of their operations related to hazelnuts, that is literally called out by the rule that says it's not subject to the rule. So those hazelnut operations don't have to follow this rule. Onion operations absolutely do. So what is being grown is the big part of it. The second question is how much is being sold? And it's not that we have to know exact income. It's that there are certain thresholds of income based on gross produce sales averaged over the last 3 years that basically put farms into qualifications for this produce safety rule. And so if you're making less than an inflation adjusted cutoff, which for now it's just over 29,000, those operations would be excluded based on not grossing enough sales from produce. So they would not have to be subject to this rule. But farms grossing over that would be. And the third part of coverage is where is that produce growing? So is that produce, are these tomatoes, say, going to commercial processing? Are they going to be canned? So there would be a validated kill step there. And so those tomatoes would be basically processed in a manner that would kill pathogens that could make people sick. And so they could be commercially qualified, commercially exempt. So there's a processing step, kills pathogens. So those tomatoes would not be subject to the rule. So where is it going depends on a lot of things. Some people may be selling it at a farmer's market where it's going directly to a consumer. There may be other exemptions associated with that. And then it could be going to a wholesale distributor. So there are lots of options in terms of where that produce is going. And answering just one of these questions doesn't necessarily kick farms into coverage, but it's all three of them. So this is a very basic kind of introduction to the produce safety rule. Carla, next slide. So that's what it is and a little bit of how farms can be covered. But some of the big things to keep in mind related to some recent updates and kind of hot topics related to the produce safety rule, and this is nationwide, are related to agricultural water. So agricultural water is water that is coming into direct contact with the produce that people will be consuming raw. It can be used for things like spraying chemicals. It can be used for things like washing your hands. But when the rule came out, it was published in 2013, this portion of the water, this portion of the rule related to agricultural water was met with quite a reception in terms of there are numerical values for generic E. coli that are established based on your water source, so groundwater, municipal water, surface water, that require certain testing amounts as well as meeting these microbial standards. And it was met with a lot of conversation related to how are farms actually able to meet these numerical criterias, which are based on the recreational water standard, and then when and how are farms supposed to be testing. And so in 2017, this part of the rule was actually put on hold, and it is still currently on hold. As of December of last year, this part of the rule, a new portion was proposed. A new proposal for this section, this is called Subparty of the Produce Safety Rule, came out, and essentially it completely eliminates the requirement for testing. It changes that to testing is still optional, but it now requires that producers conduct an agricultural water assessment on their own systems. None of this is finalized, so this portion of the rule is still on hold. FDA will be discussing it with farms when they're out on inspections, but what is to be known right now is agricultural water. There's a new proposed rule out there. It very much has changed what is written in the current rule, and it's currently not being enforced upon. One of the other updates related to the produce safety rule is, remember we're talking about what is being grown or harvested or packed or held. And so this rarely consumed raw list, this is the list that includes things like hazelnuts, that, you know, if folks are growing this, people rarely consume those raw, according to FDA's data. And so that list is currently under review and could potentially be expanded upon. And so we don't have updates from FDA as to when that will happen. So some general hot topics related to the produce safety rule. All right, Carla, let's transition to talking about our program here at ODA. So we have a non-regulatory program, and we are fully funded by a grant from the Food and Drug Administration, who administers the produce safety rule, and FSMA. And so that means that we focus on outreach and education, technical assistance, as well as compiling and verifying our farm inventory. And FDA then conducts the produce safety rule inspections in Oregon. And we're not the only state to do this, to only have taken on a non-regulatory program. There are other states out there like Hawaii. But just so everybody knows, we have a program structure where we have 4 staff, and our current budget is $630,000. And we're going to talk a lot more about the budget, what it looks like now for Path A, and then we'll look at it again in terms of if we did take on a regulatory program. But the other thing I really want to highlight is part of this grant allows us to have a partnership with Oregon State University. So next slide, Carla. And so we've partnered with several people from Oregon State University, and so Dr. Santamaria is certainly one of them. And this expands our geographical outreach for the produce safety rule, but also the expertise that we're able to offer in terms of our technical assistance to our growers across the state. So Dr. Santamaria is an expert in worker health and hygiene. And then we have Dr. Jovana Kovacic, as well as Dr. Joy Cusick, who are national microbial experts and who have greatly expanded our reach there, especially related to one of the hottest topics that we'll talk about later, which is cleaning and sanitation. And then we have Dr. Stuart Wrights, who's with the Malheur Experiment Station, as well as acting director in the Mid-Columbia Research Experiment Station up in Hood River. And he's an expert in agriculture. And so again, I can't really stress enough how much this partnership has expanded our reach across the state to multiple different commodities and different geographic regions across the state. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned kind of the 3 pillars of our program, but again, we have this non-regulatory program, and so what we spend our time doing, and this is not just ODA, but also in partnership with Oregon State, is we do a lot of education and outreach. One of the requirements of this rule is that at least one person from every covered farm attend an accredited training class. And so right now there's only one type of class that meets this criteria, but and so we teach those classes. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been offering them for free and online, and we've seen our numbers for registrations increase quite a bit, that we've had to add even more classes for this year, which I think is a good thing. The second aspect of what we do, and I think this is one of the most valuable things that we do, is we offer free, totally voluntary and confidential technical assistance, where we can come out onto individual farms and assess their strengths or their weaknesses related to the produce safety rule individually. And so we're looking at things through the lens of the produce safety rule. And one of the reasons why this is so valuable, and one of the things that I want to stress today, is that this is a very large national program, and this is a very new national program. And so being able to walk farms through on their own, of their own accord, with the produce safety rule, what its requirements are, and where the strengths and weaknesses on individual farms are, really helps in terms of the implementation and understanding of what is required of farms and how they can apply or be in compliance. As of to date, we've done 125 of these visits across the state. I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide about our numbers, but I'm not quite there yet, Carla. The biggest part of, I'd say, all of our staff's job in the program is doing the farm inventory. And this is, again, we are mandated by our grant with FDA to keep and compile a list of farms that are subject to the produce safety rule so that we know how many farms in Oregon need to be in compliance with this rule. Because again, there's no opting out. The other part of this rule I want everybody to know is that we do have to periodically upload this inventory to FDA, and that is so that they can plan their inspections. All right, next slide. So coming back to our classes, I just wanted to show you a little bit about how much we've trained. So we've done trained over 1,000 people. So the x-axis shows just number of people who've attended our classes. And then we've gone, the y-axis and the orange line is just the number of trainings we've had each year. So we've done about almost 60 classes since we started these classes. And again, we've reached over 1,000 people. And one of the things to note is that's not just Oregonians. It's not just farmers. We've certainly had some agency folks come. We've certainly had people from other states come because these classes aren't available all the time. And so when they're for free and online, that certainly helps a lot in terms of implementing and educating about the produce safety rule, not just in Oregon. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you two timelines here. So the FDA approached states to apply for 5 years of funding at a time. So this was our first cycle of funding. So this is 2016 is when our program started at ODA. And this timeline does not include all of the work that we've done in the state, but it does just give you some highlights related to the rule in terms of times. And so this, again, is capturing our very first cooperative agreement cycle with FDA. And so right now we're in our second cooperative agreement cycle, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But for this timeline, it just really gives you an idea of, we started the program in 2016. I will talk more about what Senate Bill 18 is on a later slide. This will be very relevant to when we talk about potentially taking on inspections. Then we also did quite a bit of hiring in 2018. I joined the program in 2018, but I'm not the only one I'm talking about. The water compliance dates in terms of, this is related to farm sizes, were established in 2019. The produce safety rules agricultural water section was still on hold at that time. The biggest thing I think to note is that inspections started nationwide for the produce safety rule in 2019. So this was the first time when FDA was coming on to farms in Oregon to do these routine produce safety rule inspections. And then since 2020, those inspections were delayed because of COVID-19, but we've certainly continued to do all of our outreach and education. And then we have certainly, we've applied last year and were awarded our second cycle, our second round of 5-year funding. So that next slide, please, Carla. So basically, I wanted to show you that we are here, really at the end of our first year of this second cycle in 2022. And so we've done a lot more hiring. Last year, the proposed agricultural water subpart came out. This is at the end of last year. We've certainly done quite a lot of technical assistance as well as teaching our classes. And then one of the things I will talk about here in just a moment is we've done quite a lot, or we've done some and are planning to do quite a lot more of commodity-specific outreach combined with listening sessions with industry. And I'm sorry, I think that the timeline may be a little bit small to read. And so we're going to be continuing with that for next year. And I've left some of these years blank just because we're still in that development timeline. And we're going to look at another timeline in a little bit that looks at what this could change to if we took on a regulatory program. So even though we have 2024 and 2025 not really showing money activities, all of those are included in terms of our technical assistance visits, our classes, and our farm inventory work. So all of that would continue. Next slide, please. So I think one of the things to preface the entire day is in terms of why at the time that funding came out back in 2016, did ODA not take on a regulatory program? And there are three kind of main reasons. So at the start, this again is a very large national program and only 5 years of funding were being offered at the time. And so there was a very large concern about, okay, this is a fairly big push. What happens, and what happens specifically to our industry or to the program, if that funding goes away? Where does the financial burden fall if the federal funding is removed? The second one is, at the time, industry was not in favor of ODA taking on inspections. Now, since that 5-year funding was awarded, we've certainly had some sectors that were interested in us taking on the inspections, but it wasn't the majority. And I will talk more about that because we do believe that that is changing. And the other and the biggest part, I'd say, or one of the biggest parts, that probably equal when we're talking about the 3 of these items, is remember the agricultural water portion is put on hold. And so certain aspects of the rule, the agricultural water part, the farm definition, what's on that rarely consumed raw list, these things are all not finalized. We're 6 years into our program, and these are things that are still not finalized. And so what is that speed limit? What would we be regulating against related to those 3 examples? So those were some of the main reasons why at the time ODA decided to not take on a regulatory program. Next slide. So I've mentioned some discussion about we think that industry's interest in us taking on inspections has changed. So kind of related to that is we're doing quite a lot of industry-related outreach. And we did our first one last week on Monday. And we were able to do work with a private blueberry farm. And really we focused on some of the common issues that we've noticed related to commodities, certain commodities like blueberries, tree fruit, mixed vegetables, and onions, for example. And these are issues that we've seen on things like doing our technical assistance visits, things that we've heard from the farmers after they've had an inspection, that type of thing. So we wanted to come in and do specific outreach related to some of these issues. And so, for example, the one on last Monday, we were able to work with a blueberry farm who let us do a demonstration on how to clean and sanitize these mechanical harvesters. And so we have several more planned. So actually the June 8th one up in Hood River will probably be moved to a week forward just because it may conflict with cherry harvest. But the other ones are certainly planned, and we are also working on getting one scheduled in Hermiston. But I bring this up not just to highlight some of the outreach that we're doing. These are also meetings that are combined with getting industry groups together and talking about what it might look like if we did take on the inspections and hearing from the consumers or the producers about what they would like. And so specifically from our blueberry group that was just happened last week, the message was they would like ODA to take on the inspection role. And the reasoning partly was they want the regulators to be Oregonians. They want the regulators to be from in Oregon and be familiar with Oregon agriculture and the commodities that they're regulating. That was the main message from our blueberry group listening session. And we'll certainly be passing on the information that we gather from our tree fruit one, from the one that we're going to have actually in Ashland, and then going over to Ontario as well. Next slide, Carla. So, okay, we've talked a little bit about the background, but let's talk about what's going on right now related to the FDA-led produce safety rule inspections. Then I'm going to talk about what's going on in other states, and then we'll move on to what it will look like if we did take on a regulatory program. But for right now, I think it's important to remind everybody that inspections began nationwide, not just in Oregon, in 2019. For this year, though, FDA has started doing inspections on Oregon farms, and they are calling farms to schedule those right now. So some of your growers, some of you may have heard from FDA. It's also very important to know that right now these inspections are generally pre-announced. So whether that's FDA is calling for 2 weeks in advance or they're calling a day in advance, they should all be pre-announced. The only ways that they should not be pre-announced is if a farm does not respond to FDA's request to schedule an inspection, or if there is a for-cause reason. So there is an issue, people are getting sick from product. That's an example. Just to know is FDA has done quite a bit of hiring since inspections started in 2019. So there are 25 investigators. They're not all based in Oregon, but there are 25 investigators from FDA who could be coming into Oregon to do inspections. Now I've heard as well there could be a 26th person, but they're in a supervisory level, and so their availability is a little bit lower. So just to be aware of the number of investigators. And again, not all of those investigators will be doing inspections in Oregon. So there are other states around the country that are also doing the non-regulatory program, meaning FDA has to do that in those states. So in general, FDA is requesting farms set aside 2 full days for an inspection. That's not to say that the inspections always take 2 full days, but in case there is an issue that they discover, they want the farms to have those 2 days set aside to meet with FDA. Next slide. So far, what do the numbers look like? As of today in Oregon, we've had 150 inspections occur, and that's with our 25 FDA investigators. Now, the authority column on the far right-hand side, I left that blank for Oregon because we don't have a regulatory program at this time. However, and there's that yellow box at the bottom, and again, we will talk about authority and what that means in a moment. If we did take on a regulatory program, we would be operating under FDA authority. So our investigators would be credentialed through FDA. Talk about that again in a moment. Our neighbors in Washington and Idaho have similar inspection numbers. Washington has done 139 inspections, and they have 3 full-time produce safety rule investigators. They are operating under FDA authority, and they also have more farms that are subject to the produce safety rule than Oregon does. Between Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, Oregon's in the middle in terms of numbers of covered farms. Idaho has done just over 100 inspections. They have their own authority, and they have 2 part-time produce safety rule inspectors. Next slide, Carla. So if we did take on this program, when the program started in 2016, we did work on getting legislation passed to allow us the ability to take on a regulatory program. So Senate Bill 18 allows for that, but this would give us the authority to take on these inspections under FDA authority. So FDA would still be involved in these inspections. All of the investigators or the inspectors would be credentialed through FDA. So as of right now, we have the ability to move forward. We have not adopted this into reference, but having that legwork done is very helpful if the state does decide to move forward. Next slide. I think before we kind of jump into what that program would look like if we move into the regulatory program, I think it's very important to highlight that nationwide funding for the produce safety rule programs has been reduced. The second second cycle of 5-year funding has been reduced. So the last year of our first cycle, so our year 5, we had over $100,000 more to work with in terms of our technical assistance program. This year, our budget was reduced, and again, we're not the only state that had reduced funding. So we have $630,000 to work with. Next slide, please. So for where Oregon is in terms of numbers of farms that are subject to the produce safety rule, an estimate of what's covered there, we have, for our Path A non-regulatory funding, we have $630,000 to do all of the work that I just described, that technical assistance, that farm inventory, that teaching of these classes. If we were to move into a regulatory program, we would potentially get an additional $500,000 to do that regulatory work. Now, some of you may have heard slightly different numbers at a previous meeting. That was based on our amount of covered farms, which we've recently updated. And so that's why the number has changed slightly. But let's look into, if we did actually move into a regulatory program, if we did this tomorrow, would we immediately get $500,000 additional to run the regulatory program? No. So let's look at that. Next slide, please, Carla. So if the state decides to move forward, how do we do that? I've been talking quite a bit with FDA. Now, one of the things to be aware of is no other state has done this at this point in terms of working with FDA. So this is the process, and we would be very much guinea pigs here. We would have to apply for Path B funding. We can technically do that at any time. So again, Path B is that regulatory program. One thing I really want to stress is all of the work in Path A, the technical assistance, the farm inventory, teaching classes, that doesn't go away if we take on a regulatory program. It's included with a regulatory program. But again, if the state does decide to move forward, our last day to apply for a regulatory program is very soon. It's March 2023. And so that's partly because we're in this 5-year cycle. And so, it's not quite a lot of time. The other reason why it's so short is because there is going to be and going to have to be some overlap time. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Once we do apply, the application needs to go through review by FDA, and then there will be an outside objective review board assessment of the application, its viability, the state's ability to take on that program. And what we've been talking about with FDA, and again, we don't have a model for this, is approximately a year. It could be a little more, it could be a little yet less of overlap with FDA while we get partial funding to do some hiring, to do some training of those inspection staff, as well as to develop things like our standing operating procedures for a regulatory program, as well as to do transfer of data from FDA, because they have been doing 150 inspections in Oregon and we don't have that data. So we would have to do quite a bit of transfer between the two programs. So it's very important to know, even if we did decide to apply on March 1st of 2023, it wouldn't automatically kick in on March 2nd of 2023. And it is also very important to note that even if we did apply, we would still have FDA doing inspections in Oregon for a little while we hired staff, while we trained staff, et cetera. So there's a potential, and this is an estimate, for us, if we did decide to move into that direction, to take on regulation and be doing the inspections as ODA, either in late 2023 or in 2024 at the earliest. So it's not going to happen immediately. Carla, next slide, please. So again, and I know I'm being repetitive here, but if we did take on the inspections, they would be being done under FDA authority by ODA. One of the things to note, and this is a nationwide thing for all states, is that FDA requires states to inspect 20% of the farms in their inventory. We have over 800 farms in our farm inventory right now, so that's about 165 inspections that ODA would be required to do every single year. And that number is subject to change as we find more farms that are subject to the produce safety rule. So this is very much an estimate because that farm inventory is a living document. So again, ODA, if we did move in this direction, would not start doing inspections for a little while, potentially not until 2024. And we estimate that we would need to hire 3 full-time inspectors, and each one of those inspectors would do approximately 55 inspections each year. Next slide. Another way to look at this, and again, I'm sorry if it's a little small, is so on the right-hand side is what our program looks like in terms of salary currently. So what our current percentage is. I think we're at 68% of our entire budget is being spent on salary. If we added 3 new inspectors, if we added a lead for our outreach program, if we added an administrative support person, and this is the minimum amount of staffing that we think we would need for an inspection program, we would still be close to almost to 70% of our budget would be being spent on salary. And again, 3 inspectors, 165 inspections would be being conducted total. Next slide, please. Potentially, these inspectors would be based on the east and the west side of the state. This would all be subject to changing in terms of where we would be able to hire. Next slide, please. And so I know you have another timeline, but we're coming to the end, I promise. In terms of, this is what our timeline could look like if we wanted to move into a regulatory program. So again, on each one of these years, so we are currently at the end of our first year of this second cycle, and we're at the beginning of a 5-year cycle with FDA's funding. We could apply for the regulatory program. We could apply, so July 1st is when year 2 starts. So we could apply whenever the state chooses to. And then at that point, we would potentially get partial funding and be hiring inspectors, training them, doing development of our protocols for the regulatory program, as well as doing data transfer between FDA. Now, again, during this first year, this 2023, FDA would still be doing inspections on Oregon farms. One of the other things, with the potential start date for ODA to be doing those inspections in 2024. One of the other things to note for each one of these years is that all of the technical assistance work, all of the classes, all of the farm inventory would still be occurring each and every single year. The main thing also to know is that at the very end of this cycle, so in 2026, FDA is requiring all states to have a 100% verified farm inventory. So there's quite a big push there. And I didn't mention it before, but how we do our farm inventory is we do quite a lot of mailers, we do quite a lot of cold calling. So I think some of you may have spoken to me a little bit. So I apologize about that, but thank you. Let's see, next slide. Again, I want to close with just reminding you again of what it would look like if we did take on a regulatory program. We would be operating under FDA's authority. So FDA would still be involved in our inspections in Oregon, even though they would be ODA staff doing those inspections. We would be doing approximately, as of today's numbers, 165 inspections per year. And we would not be able to conduct these until our program was fully functional, potentially not until 2024. And with that, last slide is just thank you so much for your time, and I would love to take any questions. And Casey Prentice is certainly on, and so if you have any questions I can't answer, he will certainly be able to.
You two have been scribbling pretty hard. I noticed that.
Elin Miller, appreciate the 101 and the requirements and all of that. And I guess one of the big questions, especially from a timing standpoint, if the state were to decide to proceed, that it would need to be part of our budget discussion or not, because what I was trying to do the math on the gap between what we would be getting from federal funding versus what might be needed from state funding in order to carry the 3 FTE additional for inspection. And then the second thing I just want to clarify, there are only 4 states in the US that have not taken on the inspection. That's a number I heard. And so we're kind of in the minority there. So, but for good reason, I can understand why we waited, but.
Yeah, we're absolutely, the majority of states have taken on regulatory programs. That is true. The examples are Iowa as well as Hawaii have not taken on regulatory programs. For example, let's see, Rhode Island started out not taking on a regulatory program, but they did move into a regulatory program. They are not a good example for us in terms of moving forward and transitioning into a regulatory program because they didn't have any overlap with FDA. They have a very small state. They had just this very relatively simple model in terms of that transition. The other states that didn't do it, there are several states that actually didn't take on any part of this program. And so like North and South Dakota, for example, they don't have any state-funded program. And so FDA does both aspects of outreach as well as the regulation in those states. Now, there are not a ton of covered farms in those states. There are a lot of farms, but not growing produce that's subject to the rule.
Thank you. And then the gap question.
Yeah, the budget question, I can take that. So in our current budget, we have a pop to continue the current FSMA staff we have. So there would be an opportunity to modify that through the legislative budget process because that is federal funding. So we need to maintain the authority for the existing FSMA staff that we have. The alternative is to do this if we did it outside the normal budget cycle is we would just then, we would still be able to hire those staff and then go back and conform later on through the legislative fiscal office. And so we're not necessarily tied since we have the authority to take on those inspections with Senate Bill 18 that we did in 2017, as Susanna mentioned. We have pathways on the staffing side if needed.
Okay. Just a follow-up, just again, the delta between what we might anticipate and understand the federal stuff can change, but it sounds like the feds have been saying, well, this is important, we're funding this. And so what would need to come out of either general fund or other sources if we were to take over inspection?
Lauren Henderson, Deputy Director, so I'll answer that in a couple different ways. The federal process for these historically is they get the states started, and then eventually those funds slowly find their way out of our budget, and we either have to get general fund to supplement what that activity is, or the bad word is find a way to charge a fee for it. I don't anticipate this being any different at some point. We will have to manage with what we have, and I think Susanna laid out where most of our money would be going, which is those staff costs, which is where it's at. And so we would have to look at what we have between the two programs, figure out what the gaps may be, and project out forward and have a plan to figure that out. Did that get to your question?
Yeah, and so the question is, we don't really know, but again, this seems a lot different because I've dealt with federal, delegation of authorities and funding or lack of. Most of the time there's like zero. And I was excited that there was something there. And I don't know, it just seems like this is just a high priority in the politics of making sure the food is safe and the produce industry nationally. I would think we might be in a different place.
Yeah, no, I can tell you the history of this because former Director Koba was actually leading the national effort at the National Association of State Directors of Agriculture. She was the chair of the Food Policy Committee, and her primary message to FDA was, do not ask the states to do this for nothing. If you're going to change this law, you need to pay for it. I think that is still the sentiment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, with the National Association of State Directors of Ag, all 50 states, to say, now, obviously things change, but that's where I think the emphasis still is.
I think one of the things Susanna laid out in the existing budget, if we were to take on the inspection side, is the money we could receive would cover both parts. So the technical assistance, outreach and education, and the inspections today. We can't project because these are subject to federal appropriations, how that changes. I will say Senator Merkley, who is on the Appropriations Committee, has worked very hard to ensure that FDA is getting appropriate funding to fund FSMA today, right? So he's been a strong advocate. His office is talking to us regularly to on what they're doing there on that side. So federal budget cycle, we can't predict that. I would say, there are decisions should we take on the inspection piece of it, and our overall funding would be reduced. We would then be have decisions we would have to make as an agency, and whether that be state funding, fee-for-service funding, or we shift, because while those outreach and educational technical assistance are still part of it, we do a lot there. And one question I had for Susanna is, compared to, say, Washington, are we doing more on that side? So we're out working with our producers to make sure they're in compliance more than other states, and that would maybe that breakdown may have to switch, but that's all future things that we can't see today, if that makes sense.
And yes, just to answer that question, as part of these technical assistance visits, we do an anonymous survey after the end of these visits. And it's not, hey, we were just at Joe Smith's farm and there were these issues. It was, this is the farm size we were at, and these are some of the themes that we focused on, like worker training. But all states get those reports back in terms of numbers of these technical assistance visits that are done. And Oregon is consistently at the top, if not the top of that list, in terms of amount of outreach. Our numbers in terms of training classes are also at the top of the list in terms of what other states are offering.
Barbara Boyer, thank you for your presentation. That was great. Can you explain the difference between FDA authority and state authority?
Yeah, so FDA authority, let's say it's kind of the same nexus or backbone, if you want to take it from the standpoint of When inspectors go out on an inspection, what should be in place is there should be a subject matter expert that is available for an inspection if there is an issue. If an inspector has an interpretation that needs to be clarified or sees an issue and thinks that certain things need to occur. And so under FDA authority, so those inspectors are acting as FDA credentialed members, and they would be using subject matter experts that are on the FDA team. Under state authority, there is more, I'd say, autonomy in terms of the states are setting up their own subject matter experts. There may not be as much and again, I don't know. I was going to say transparency in terms of reporting if there are issues, but that's just what I've heard in terms of discussions with other states who are acting under their own authority.
And another example of this, so we have delegated authority in many areas from the federal government. So one would be the pesticides program. We have delegated authority from EPA to enforce the pesticides program in Oregon, but we have underlying state law. So typically when we take any action as a state regulator, we're doing it under Oregon state law because we have that state law, as opposed to in this program, we would always be referring back to that federal code.
Eli Miller, unless we did what Idaho did, I guess, to have their own underlying state law, which could happen later if we wanted. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments for Casey or Susanna?
Yeah, I had another question, sorry. So I saw the 20% inspection benchmark, but when I saw the Washington numbers, they clearly didn't meet that, right? They were at less than 130, something like that. So what have we heard from Washington, like the recourse and the conversations with FDA when they're clearly not meeting their 20% inspection benchmark?
Yeah, so I think I'll take this from stepping back a little bit. So a lot of the FDA's kind of estimates for funding, as well as estimates for numbers of farms that states need to be inspecting every year, originally started out with our National Agricultural Statistics Service data from 2017. That data, we've all found, has very much overestimated the amounts of covered farms. And so technically, Washington needs to be inspecting, according to the funding announcement, over 500 farms a year. But their farm inventory does not support that there are those amount of farms in Oregon. So in terms of pushback from FDA, they are, especially in terms of they've just had to rehire a lot of their inspectors because they had some turnover. They have a new director as well, or program manager up there. I don't think that response from FDA has been negative. It's been very much, okay, this is what you've got going on. What FDA has spoken to me about is, especially when they're assessing a state wanting to take on a regulatory program, it's one thing to say, let's take on a regulatory program, it'll be great, versus what is the state actually able to do? And so if we have to inspect 165 farms a year and we're able to inspect 5 farms a year, it seems like there would be certainly a big discussion. In terms of what I've heard from Connie Fisk up in Washington, their new program manager, there hasn't been that negative discussion with FDA. It's just been a reality check of the boots on the ground, what folks are able to do.
I have additional questions if I could. Thank you. So in the timeline, you talked about March 2023 as the timeline to apply under, but I just want to be clear, that's under this funding cycle. When this funding cycle expires, we expect another 5-year funding cycle. So it's not the only time we will ever have to make that decision, but it's under this funding cycle. So until 2026.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and we could apply any time until then, but the last day for FDA to be willing to consider this would be March 2023.
And then I have one other thing I wanted to highlight, since you heard about this yesterday in some public comments from the Oregon Farm Bureau. They mentioned when there's a food safety issue going on farm, about them wanting and the producers that they represent wanting ODA in the driver's seat. I just want to be clear, when there is a food safety concern on farm, FDA, regardless if we are on taking on inspection under FSMA, FDA will absolutely still be involved, and they will more often than not absolutely still be driving. So that doesn't change. And I just want that to be clear, since you kind of heard that point made yesterday as a point of concern.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Susanna, for doing a great presentation.
All right, so next we have our Deputy Director, Lauren Henderson, with the hemp program update. Yeah, where you going?
Good morning again, Lauren Henderson, Deputy Director. I feel so smart when I sit with our staff like Susanna. It just blows my mind away. And as we talk to hemp, I will echo that with Sunny and Mike, who I will bring up in just a second, and then I will step backwards. I think before I start the hemp conversation, though, I will lay this out about many of our programs that I hope the board just realized, is that our staff and our managers are most of the time in the middle. And that is a very hard, difficult place to always be, and our staff do a very good job of being in that place. Hemp is no exception to that, and you will hear about that in just a second. They're going to provide you an update of where we're at. I think that was asked, and I think Elin, you and I have talked about this before. Where we're at today is, I thought I was going to be able to say we have full staffing, but I think Mike will tell you he's missing still a couple of people due to some turnover. So we continually have that challenge as we do in all of our programs. We have 12 total staff budgeted in that program. But secondly, and most importantly, what I wanted to say today is this. We are at a place that I never thought we would be at. We do not have permission from the FBI to conduct the criminal background checks that are required by our state plan and state law. We have been waiting. The application went in August. We are not the primary state lead agency. That's the Oregon State Police, and you can imagine why. It's the law enforcement data system for the national system. We knew it was going to take 4 or 5 months. We did not know it was going to take 9, 10, and I still don't have an answer as of this morning. The FBI generally is having very difficulty with our state statute and really what it is saying, and really does it give us the authority to do what we want to do. I think there may be a sentiment that they're having a hard time understanding why hemp farmers need to have a background check, and I'll just say that. So long and short, Alexis and I have pulled out every resource we know how to pull out. We've got DOJ involved. I think there's 3 or 4 attorneys there. The state police are involved. I've got the governor's office involved. I've told anybody and everyone that would listen to me that we need help, and we're trying to get that. So fast forward to today. That's a big problem. We have several hundred growers who have been patiently, frankly, waiting. They need to plant, as you can imagine. They should have planted a month and a half ago. That's a bad thing for the obvious reasons, but it's also bad when we're trying to get a legitimate hemp industry in place, and we worked hard last year, Southern Oregon particularly on the law enforcement side, and now we have a place where those that are trying to do the right thing are having difficulty doing the right thing. And that is a bad message to them, even though we're all trying to do what we need to do. I can't articulate to you what the FBI issue is. I've heard it's an issue nationwide. And besides that, we made a decision yesterday to go forth in the best way that we could, even though it didn't quite fit the box. And so we are working today to try to have OSP help us do an Oregon-only background check. And then USDA hemp program has offered separately but parallel to that to help us do another type of background check. It is not the gold standard for background checks, but it's a background check. And in order to move this along so that our hemp growers can actually get something in the ground. So you'll hear more about that. I can't guarantee that we're going to get that soon, today, tomorrow, but we're working on that. So that's where we're at today. For me, and then I will defer to Sunny and Mike. I am on the governor's task force on cannabis. We will be meeting soon, and delighted to get appointed to that task force along with Director Marks from OLCC. There's a lot of work to do there, so that's coming up. And then I'm also on the Criminal Justice Commission's grant award committee for that extra funding that needs to get to the local counties for law enforcement. So I have those two things on my to-do list. So with that, Sonny, Mike, why don't you guys come up?
Good morning. I'm Mike Odenthal. I'm currently the hemp program manager.
Sunny Summers, the cannabis policy coordinator and special assistant to the director.
So just to give you a little bit of a rundown on where we are on staffing, Lauren mentioned that we're short a little bit. Through the winter time, this fall and winter, we were able to hire 2 additional people. So I was feeling pretty good about where we were going into this summer. So at that time, it gave me 4.5 inspectors and 1.5 case reviewers. I've got 1 person up in Salem that I'm splitting half and half between case review and inspection, and 3 admins. However, recently, one of my inspectors, and sorry to say it's in my Medford office, has departed. I've lost an admin person to a new position in the state. And then the dirtball manager's retiring in July too. So we are currently looking for, that's me, by the way.
He's the dirtball.
We are currently looking for 3 people. Okay. So we're busy, and that will get us back to 10. We've drugged my feet a little bit on bringing us clear up to 12, just because we don't know where we're going to end up with growers. Currently, I have 312 growers standing in the wings waiting to get their license. And I'm not sure that 300, if that's where we're going to be, if we can support the full 12 staff. So I want to move slowly at that. That's where we are on staffing. On top of hiring a couple people through the winter, we were busy following up on our Operation Table Rock, which House Bill 3000 started last summer. And we have managed to prevail in 2 contested case hearings that contested whether or not we actually had the authority to detain and order destruction of crops. We prevailed in both of those hearings. However, one has appealed. And so we're waiting through the appellate process, and that's probably going to be, my understanding is about this time next year before we may hear. So that one will be hanging out. The first one that we prevailed in has been issued a civil penalty and destroyed what was left of the crop at that time. So that was good. On top of that, I've got 12 civil penalties sitting with Lauren, totaling about $85,000 worth of penalty for the remaining presumptive marijuana growers that we issued orders of destruction and never heard anything back from them. They've just kind of ghosted us. And that's been one of our biggest issues with the presumptive growers. We issue them an order, we go to their registered agent, we go to the addresses, and they're just gone. So that has been a problem as far as getting penalties issued. However, we also have the denial option, and we've issued 1 denial to date for a renewal of a license, and that was to one of our presumptive marijuana growers. However, none of the rest of them have reapplied. So that's the good news. We can't deny until they reapply. So we've got our list, and should they reapply, they will be denied. I did have a phone call with one of the presumptive growers and was asking, and I said, yeah, you're welcome to apply, but I'm going to deny it right off the bat. So, it's up to you. What do you want to do? And so that's where we've been and up to date with Table Rock, and House Bill 3000 and the enforcement so far. Cindy, you want to go over some of the measures?
So in addition, House Bill 3000 also had the authority for ODA to do the background checks that Lauren has already mentioned. That's part of the 2018 Farm Bill and becoming a USDA approved state. So think of this as a delegated authority like our pesticide or our food safety program. So we were able to get those rules implemented and get a state plan approved by USDA in time for our January 1st start. So these licenses are good for the calendar year. So we are working forward on that. There's some additional pieces within House Bill 3000 that talk about tracking products that are going to be inhaled or consumed. So we're going to start working on those rules, as well as, you know, we keep a running list throughout the year of, wow, I wish the program did this, or we really needed to do that. So we will be going through yet again another round of rulemaking this summer with the hemp program. That covers House Bill 3000. Senate Bill 1564 was passed during the 2022 legislative session, so this most recent one. And what it says is basically that any county who declares a state of emergency related to cannabis and notified the department this year by March 15th creates a moratorium for new licenses within that county. So if somebody was licensed in that county in 20 or 21, they are not subject to the moratorium. However, if they are new to that county, they will not be able to get a license. And so we received those declarations from 3 counties, Douglas, Josephine, and Jackson counties, so going right down I-5. The bill allows for these moratoriums for 2 years. So counties will have until January 1st of 23 for a moratorium for the growing season of 23. So again, that's going to be your calendar year. So those rules have been filed. They'll be effective on Monday. We have information available on our website if anybody wants to take a look at it, and we'll be sending out a notice to the industry. Mike has about 27 applications that we are going to have to issue a denial. And I apologize if I don't have the exact legal language, but basically we will not be able to issue those licenses in those 3 counties. So once those rules are effective on Monday, those growers will receive a letter in the mail letting them know that they cannot grow in those 3 counties. Additionally, you may or may not remember that hemp testing is tied to marijuana testing. And so we basically adopt by reference the Oregon Health Authority testing rules for marijuana. So this is all of your post-harvest testing requirements for anything that you eat, drink, or apply to your skin. They made updates and filed those rules March 31st. So we have to update our rules to reflect those changes. We will have temporary rules making those updates going out early next week. And then that will also be part of the permanent rulemaking package that we do later this summer. Back to you.
Okay. Following up on Operation Table Rock, because that can't be a one and done. We are currently working on the plan for summer 22. Just an inspection cycle. It will be statewide. I cannot focus only on the 2 counties we focused on last year. So we will be focusing on statewide. I'm looking to inspect between 150 and 200 operations. And that would be both a records inspection that we would normally conduct, as well as testing and sampling of the crop that they have in the ground. I will be working with OLCC again, because in order to do that many samples, I need help. And we will be using their testing equipment, the Orange Photonics Light Lab machines, to conduct that testing. We're going to modify things a little bit that will streamline the process so that I'm not waiting on OLCC's inspectors to write reports and get it approved and get it over to me, that kind of thing. I'm hoping this will streamline some of that. We learned a lot throwing together Table Rock in 30 days and getting down and putting that many people on the ground. and doing 316 inspections. It was a lot of work to clean those up and finalize them through the wintertime. So that's where I'm planning. And what we're going to do is we're going to target people. So we've got a list of growers who failed to report all of the things they're supposed to report to us this last year. We're going to go pay a visit to them because, one, I want to make sure they understand what do they need to report to us. And two, some of those are some of our people who are hiding. And we want to test their material and make sure, are you hemp or not? So that we can push some of those folks that didn't reapply again this year, some of the additional ones that did, make them go away. The other thing is there are some growers down in the Table Rock operation area that we were not able to finalize stuff with just because their crop disappeared, you know, lots of excuses. So we're going to go pay them a visit again. And so that's what we're putting together. It's going to be a fairly big undertaking again. It will require law enforcement assistance. And so Rich Evans at OLCC and I are already talking and working that process out to get the logistics going and get it on the ground. So that's our plan moving forward.
And I would just add and one other thing. In the past, we have not had a known universe for the hemp program. We had no deadline for applications. And so we would receive applications in August, September, and y'all thinking, what in the world, right? Because unless you're growing indoors, you are not planting your outdoor crop in August or September. So the other part of the rulemaking from last year is that we put in a cutoff date of May 31st for grower applications. So regardless of whether you're a returning grower from last year or a new grower this year, if you want to grow in 22, you must get your application to the department by May 31st. We will not accept or approve any grower applications after that date. So that's going to help with Mike's ability to go out and look at a certain percentage of those growers, you know, and the reason we're talking about law enforcement is primarily for staff safety as well. It's a really important piece of this puzzle.
And do you have any questions?
I just had one addition I wanted to add about the Hemp Commission. So the Hemp Commission was also created. I have appointed temporary members as laid out in statute. Those temporary members are working on setting up their administrative process, their draft rules or final rules, and then which have to be adopted by September, I believe. And then we will go through a process of appointing final or permanent members, and they will get on the more normal commission appointment cycle. But that process is also moving forward.
And they're right on track. They're doing a great job.
Miguel Lopez, really quickly. So how many of these growers that you denied or are pending denial find a loophole to apply under some other format? I.e. like a relative of theirs applies instead of them.
So that would be one of the benefits of the moratoriums that are in place down in those two counties that we visited last year. Because if they did not have a license last year or the year before, they cannot apply. And so we have seen in the past a revolving door of LLCs that have applied for each different year. They've got a new company. But it turns out to be the same people. And so they can't do that this year. They have to come back under the original name they used previously. And if they do that, then we can deny them.
Elin Miller for the record. Director Taylor, thank you, and thank you, Lauren, and obviously a great team, not only to do this again, because I think this is really important leading to this next year, that the work that has been done, that with the cooperation with OLCC and everything that the department has led, the foundation that was established, and now the expansion of Operation Table Rock statewide. And anyway, I just want to commend the team for all the efforts. You might wonder why in the world is somebody who's a wine person in Umpqua hearing, but we have a lot of wine grape growers that have been impacted because right next door these things are going on. It's been dangerous. It's been scary. We saw some issues with just the type of housing for farm labor that these people have. Anyway, it's great that I think we have the tools now, maybe not all you need. So please let us know if there's other tools you need to nip this in the bud really early, so to speak. Anyway, because I do think legitimate marijuana and hemp growers want to make sure people are playing by the rules. So thank you.
If I might, Chair Harper. Thank you, Elin, and thank you for sitting on one of our hemp racks. I may come calling again. But in addition to what Mike talked about, we started in December of 2019 a monthly meeting among all the natural resource agencies, the county code enforcement staff that want to show up, law enforcement around the state, so that we can talk about what it is that each of our agencies would be looking for when somebody's on site at one of these places. And so we know who to call when we see a housing issue or a water issue. And I've seen that work. You know, a complaint comes into me about something and I'm able to send it out to those various agencies and we're able to address it. So that's another piece that we've tried to work on as well.
Barbara Boyer. So I echo Elin that I'm really pleased that Operation Table Rock is going statewide. So are you going to rename it? Just kidding.
My intention is to call it Summer of 22 Inspections. I want it to become the norm.
So on the destroy part, when are they call them destroy? Or are they actually raids? I mean, would you say that on some of these sites?
For Table Rock, no, they are not raids.
Okay.
The law enforcement does do raids. And so, you know, when we do a destruction, it's a very slow, meticulous administrative process. I issue a detainment. Then I have to work through the detainment with the grower, and it would be for any crop that we have done. I've done many of these under the pesticide realm when there was contamination. So we work through that detainment with the grower as to what can we do with this crop now. And if it comes to the point where that crop has to be destroyed, then we discuss how do we destroy this and where do you want to proceed. And then we issue either a notice of destruction or enter into an agreement where it's an agreed amount of destruction and how we're going to do that. Mm-hmm. Then we try to observe those, especially if we've ordered the destruction. We'll have one of our folks or two of our folks go and actually watch how it gets destroyed. And with hemp, many times they're actually burning it because it's been harvested already and dried. If it's still in the field, they can flail it, they can disc it, any number of things that they can do. You know, and then on the law enforcement side, many times we will get called and asked to come with them. So the law enforcement then conducts their raid and secures the site, and then they'll ask us to come in and give them expert advice on, is this hemp, is this cannabis, help us look at what we're seeing here.
So you are informed by law enforcement if they're going to go and raid?
Usually, yes.
So I'm curious if you've discovered any environmental issues when law enforcement comes in and does the destroy.
We don't document it very well because there's usually other agencies there as well. But yeah, there's been problems. There have been problems.
Follow up. Do you see any coordination happening in the future on that particular topic?
That's part of
Yes.
those monthly meetings.
Right. That's where those monthly meetings are helping out.
And there's also, I think, a group of folks in Southern Oregon specifically, like our field staff, that are meeting around that topic as well.
The cooperation between multiple levels of governmental agencies is almost amazing to watch because it's happening from city to county to state to federal, just almost seamlessly.
Thank you. My next question is most likely for you, Director Taylor. With our new labs being built in Wilsonville, is there a potential that we could do the ODA could do the testing on these? Oh, okay.
I think I can help too.
Okay.
So what we've been doing is using these portable light lab, and they're basically a portable HPLC. And right, HPLC?
Yes.
And so they have stood up in court. So that's part of what Mike was talking about, at least the 2 cases so far. We are working towards a reference lab in the state of Oregon with OLCC for cannabis. That will primarily be around marketplace, you know, doing like market basket surveys like we see in the food safety program. But it will increase our capacity and ability to run some of these samples if we need to do follow-up checks. So part of another bill that got passed in 22 said that if somebody contests the Orange Photonics Light Lab, that the contested samples need to go to ODA's lab to be run because we are the regulatory lab in the state. So it is all definitely tied together.
And I was going to say that one of the real advantages of the light lab is it's a 20-minute test. And if we send to the lab, it's multiple days. You know, so if we can use the field tests to determine where are we, just pretty close, and then follow up with our formal lab, then we're money ahead. I think we can move a lot faster.
Yeah, and to the Wilsonville North Valley complex, Lauren mentioned yesterday that we are in our regulatory lab at capacity, right? And so the ability to expand our capacity partly is a physical presence as well, is very much tied into these conversations about a reference lab, expanding some of these testing in the cannabis world.
All right. Well, we're actually at our public comment a portion of the meeting, and we have 2 folks that have signed up. So hate to cut you guys short. Certainly appreciate that update.
And following on yesterday, Mike and I also are proud Beaver alumni.
All right, so it doesn't look like anybody in person, but we have a couple of virtual participants for public comment. And first up is Jan Lee with Oregon Association of Conservation Districts on the USDA climate grant. Okay, it looks like if Jan Lee is not on, we'll go with Megan Kemple on resolution 319.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear myself in the room too. So there's an echo, so it's going to be a little awkward. I'll do my best. Chair Harper and members of the board, my name is Megan Kemple. I'm Director of Policy Advocacy for the Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network. I'm providing public comment regarding the Board of Ag's Resolution 319 on climate change policy considerations. I've provided written comment as well. We recommend that Resolution 319 be amended to be more relevant and useful. The resolution would better serve ODA, we think, and the ag community if it was updated to account for changes in the political landscape and climate-related challenges that have occurred in Oregon since it was first adopted in December of 2019. The most important of these changes include failure of cap and invest legislation in the 2019 session and again in 2020, adoption of Oregon DEQ's climate protection program, state agencies' climate reports and action plans in response to the governor's executive order on climate, and the Oregon Global Warming Commission's natural and working lands proposal to the governor. In addition, since 2019, farmers and ranchers in Oregon have had to deal with unprecedented drought, heat waves, wildfires, as well as severe ice storms. The current resolution language places climate change impacts in the future when they are, unfortunately, they're here today. I'm going to modify our recommendation and request a bit from what I submitted in writing. I'm not sure that the statements related to cap and invest are irrelevant, since they could be relevant to policy in the future, so it would be good to review them. But at the very least, I'd encourage the board to incorporate new language, including language acknowledging the current climate impacts to agriculture and the need for adaptation and resilience, policies that support adaptation and resilience, new language relevant to policies to advance carbon sequestration on Oregon's farms and ranches, the importance of leveraging federal funding opportunities, and language recognizing the climate benefits of preserving Oregon's farmland. We've done a comprehensive review of the existing resolution and found many opportunities to update the current whereas and resolution statements. We've provided some examples of statements that we think you should consider revising, as well as examples of some alternative statements. You'll see some of those in my written comment. We're interested in engaging in a conversation in the future about how it can be updated. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions or comments from the board? All right. Well, we're going to move to Jan Lee. Is Jan on? Okay. Well, I guess that's it for our public comment. And we'll move back onto our agenda list here. Mike Badsmarowski is up with the USDA Climate Smart Commodities Grant Update.
All right, thank you. Should I be screen sharing, or is someone, is Carlos there gonna share it? All right, there we go. All right, well, thank you, everyone. If I could have been in person, I would have, but the reason I'm not there is because of this proposal, which is due tomorrow. So I am presenting our Oregon Department of Agriculture's grant opportunity for the USDA Climate Smart Commodities Grant. And we're just titling it Producing Verified Climate Smart Agricultural Commodities Market Opportunities in Oregon. Next slide. So the grant is due tomorrow, as I mentioned, and it's kind of a one-in-a-lifetime opportunities where a one-time funding request put out by the USDA where projects can request up to $100 million. And they're expecting to fund about 20 to 30 projects. And we've kind of positioned ourselves that we would fit within that 20 to 30 project pool. The USDA defines a climate smart commodity as pretty much anything that's produced using agricultural practices that reduce greenhouse gases or sequesters carbon. And they give a bunch of examples that may lead to those reductions in emissions or sequestering of carbon, such as cover crops, reduced tillage, nutrient management, planting for high carbon density. There's really a lot of options there. And they also do say that you can have other types of practices, but there just has to be some way of verifying that you're either reducing emissions or sequestering carbon. So I know I've talked to a lot of people around the state, and I've encouraged to be creative on this if none of these things fit your production system. But that's kind of like just the main options that USDA gives. Next slide. So in our proposal, we have three main goals, with the first one being establishing a statewide grant program where we would assist agricultural producers in the implementation of climate smart practices. So this would be a competitive grant process where we would allot money to different communities around the state. And it could range from helping buy equipment to paying for amount of acres putting into a climate smart practice. So it's going to be a pretty open type of format of what kind of goals you as a producer may have. But that's the main gist of it, is we're just trying to get as much money into the state as possible to help our farmers. Next slide. The second proposal goal is to create a voluntary no-cost soil health program where we would assess the current state of the soil health in Oregon and its natural and working lands. So this would give the producer a wide range of analyses from their soil carbon stocks to their nutrient levels on their farms. We think this could be a really important one for improve nutrient management on farms, as well as give the farmer an understanding of what's going on in their soil. Next slide. And the last goal, and this is also mandatory within the grant request, is that we have to create market opportunities. So in collaboration with the local leaders around the state, we plan on creating these market opportunities for the climate smart commodities that are produced in Oregon. As I mentioned, it's necessary. We do think also this is an important aspect for kind of recognizing the producers in the state that are doing great practices towards helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequestering carbon. Next slide. And then I just want to highlight a few program highlights. Some of them I've already kind of talked a little bit about, but the majority of the funding will go directly to producers. So pretty much any of the technology that we're buying for the verification of greenhouse gases, that's going to go on farmers' lands. We're providing $20 million just in climate smart practices if funded at the full level. We would provide $20 million in grant opportunities for producers around the state. We would also be providing incentives for working on establishing what's going on around the state. So between in-depth interviews and surveys, we would provide incentives to producers to help provide that information so we can understand what's going on in the state. And then, like I mentioned, the no-cost soil health program. So all of that would be more free things to producers to get more knowledge for them and help improve their production systems. And then one of the things that I've heard a lot is there's a lack of weather stations across the state. So we would be increasing weather stations across the state in underrepresented locations. And this has many benefits, from improved greenhouse gas estimations because it's directly related to temperature and soil moisture and precipitation. So that would help improve our emissions estimates, as well as drought monitoring. Farmers' crop losses are directly tied to PRISM, which is a climate group out of Oregon State University. And if they don't have the best data available, then it might say that a farmer got rain when in fact it didn't. So improving resolution is really important for weather stations. And then the last one is kind of what I was mentioning with creation of market opportunities. We're hoping, like, the data that we are able to achieve with this project is allow farmers to go themselves to different carbon markets and also create these new partnerships with retailers and consumers about these climate smart commodities. And I think that might be the last slide. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Elon Miller, just real quickly, should a organization want to support these efforts? I've kind of heard different due dates, and some of us might be a little behind the curve on it, but can we get something to you by Friday? Is that too late, or as in tomorrow?
By like 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, we can try to include it.
Okay.
But yes, it is still, if you want us to provide a letter of support, I'm still accepting them. But keep in mind that we do have to get this in by tomorrow night, and ideally much before then, just because the systems, they can lag, we want to make sure our proposal is in.
Great, good. And just to follow up on that too, obviously we're going to be looking at Resolution 319 further. And what's the timing of when we'll know about this? Because this money is a game changer, I think, for what we're doing for climate change in Oregon. So what's the timing?
Yeah, I would like to echo that this would be really transformational across Oregon for agriculture. My assumption is we will be in discussions. If USDA likes our project, there will probably be a lot of discussions around this project of making sure everything is tied to a T on how this money would work, because we're requesting a large amount of money. So my guess is we'll at least have feelers probably in the summer, but we would know by the fall ideally. Last they updated it was end of September, monies would start being distributed, but they did delay the proposal due date. So my assumption is they'll have to delay the disbursement of money.
Okay, great. That gives us a time frame, and it wouldn't be, Director Taylor, if we wanted to just hold on it till we got and knew, we could do that too. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mike? Okay.
Eric Orm. Mike, I guess we won't know how this rolls out exactly, but if for the early adopters that are already in no-till and or in federal programs like CSP, is there going to be a way, I guess, for them to participate first? And then I do have a follow-up.
Yeah, 100%. So if I've been telling farmers, if there is something that you can add as a new practice, I know a lot of people have already adopted certain practices, but if there is something that you're willing to try, I would like to say that just be creative, and we're offering money to just find ways to reduce emissions on farms or sequester more carbon on farms. Ideally both. There is a distinction between the two, but I know that a lot of farmers, they have been, like I said, doing these practices, and some of them might feel left out, but that is not the case with this. We are asking people to create other opportunities for new practices, whether it's electrify equipment, things like that. I'd like to just echo, just make sure everyone is involved in this. And then, like I said, with the market opportunities, if they are doing amazing practices already, the creating of those market opportunities is important as well. If we can create more avenues for selling of our commodities.
I think also some that soil health information producers will absolutely be able to participate in. And I think that some of that also goes to the collective knowledge that we would hope to learn here. So, for instance, I know when I toured your place, Eric, you're doing a lot of no-till. And to compare, if we could get, a neighbor who is still tilling their land into no-till, we would have kind of your baseline, and then there's pre and post, and we'd be able to see what some of these practices really mean from a soil health perspective, and then with the weather stations, also a carbon sequestration station perspective.
Yeah, and soil analyses are very expensive. So I mean, if someone wants some soil tests done on their farm, they're totally that's open to everyone and anyone, even if they don't necessarily want to take a climate smart practice on. We're making that soil health analysis open to everyone.
So Eric Orm again, on just as a follow-up then on I'll commend the carbon testing. I've worked and had this conversation with Extension in our area and about creating a baseline. So many of these carbon markets are based on farming practice and they're not actually using real numbers to say, this is your baseline, this is what your soil tested, and then 5 or 10 years down the road, this is your carbon sequestration now. And so I commend that, because I think using real numbers will give us let us know where we're at and where we can improve. And then my final comment would be, or question would be, so will we be able to have a climate smart certification for our farms, and would that be through the state or a federal like certification?
So first part, soil carbon is my background. That's what I've studied the last like 6-7 years of my life. So that is something that I'm making sure that the protocols that we establish for measuring of soil carbon are the most extensive as possible. A lot of current soil carbon protocols that kind of regulate the free carbon markets right now are completely inadequate and do not it doesn't take into whole carbon pools. So pretty much most protocols right now, you only measure to 30 centimeters. Our goal is to at least 1 meter, and in cases much deeper than that as well. And I think that's really important for a lot of our farmers and producers around the state, that roots don't stop growing at 30 centimeters. They go much, much deeper, and there's a lot of carbon pools down there that aren't being accounted for. And then the second part, the short answer is we are exploring that option on how or if certifications are possible. I think some things have to be kind of left up possibly to the federal level, but it's something that we're exploring is all I can say.
Yeah, and I would expand on that, based upon different sectors, different commodities that might look different for what their markets need. And so we don't want to necessarily go in and say, this is what it's going to look like in Oregon, because what you need for your customer is going to be really different than somebody who's maybe selling directly to their consumer, right? And so I think that's an important piece that we hope to really work collaboratively with our stakeholders on what that looks like based upon the sector. The other thing I just wanted to underscore is there is going to be a host of partners across the state who, if we get this money, are going to help us really be able to deploy this. We could not do this on our own. And, from stakeholders, from commodity groups, from a multitude of universities around the state to really be able to, I think, implement this vision. And that for about the first full year in the project scope that we're thinking about is really conducting extensive outreach to the agricultural community, because this had to come together very quickly. I think there are some things that we're still not sure about, and we want to really be able to do a very collaborative effort to make sure that we are doing it in a way that producers are going to buy in, because ultimately that's going to be the success of the program or not.
And just to re-echo, I think I've talked to 6 or 7 at least colleges and universities in the state. I've talked to most of the commodity commissions directly, and we have the support of many of them, including the Oregon Farm Bureau. We've had extensive nonprofit and other state agencies support on this. So this has been we've really been trying to make sure everyone's involved, and everybody, if the money does get into the state, will definitely be involved, because as Director Taylor said, we will need that help.
Hi, Luisa Santa Maria. Hi, Mike. I'm glad to see you in this position, and I see you have been working really hard, and I really like this project. I hope you get this grant. It's really
Thank you.
Getting everything. Just that.
Thank you. Nice seeing you again.
All right, any other questions or comments for Mike? Okay, well, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we pretty much ate up most of our break there, but we're still going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll plan to start up again at 10:18. All right, yeah, bang the gavel. All right, it's breaks over. All right, so we're gonna hear from Jonathan Sandow and Alan Hansen on the Oregon Disaster Assistance Program, Grasshopper Cost Share Program.
Good morning, Chair Harper, Director Taylor, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow. Today, we're going to be talking about what we're referring to as the ODAP program, which is the Oregon Disaster Assistance Program. So ODAP. This program, I'll give a little context on what it is, where it came from, how it's going to function, and then the current status. So kind of where it came from was back in 2021. I think everyone in this room is aware of the kind of all the compounding natural disasters that the state went through: historic drought, historic heat, even ice storms and floods, even earlier on in the year, wildfire impacts, pest pressures that were resulted from all the sorts of different conditions. All of that kind of accumulated throughout the year, and we worked with a lot of growers around the state, working with USDA to understand where they were in their process of working with their congressional delegation and counterparts for any kind of ad hoc disaster assistance program on the federal level. We had the opportunity to host Secretary Vilsack out here. We went to a caneberry farm out in Marion County. The governor was able to join us out there. We did a roundtable with a good cross-section of Oregon agriculture producers that were and farm worker representatives to kind of get that full picture of impacts. Out of that meeting, I think both the secretary and the governor heard challenges with previous ad hoc disaster programs, how they played in Oregon, given the diversity of the specialty crops, kind of the timing of it all as well. And the governor really was interested in wanting to look for an Oregon kind of unique pathway to really respond to those situations that happened in 2021. And so kind of as the year kept going along, additional conversations were had. And then in December 13th of 2021, the Oregon legislature was convened for a special session to consider a pretty large comprehensive drought package. It was about $100 million that was appropriated through the legislative special session process during that time. Various agencies, various projects with different types of missions, all kind of with the nexus of drought and natural disaster. ODA was the recipient of $45 million of that $100 million package. 40 million of it went to a state level disaster program, which is ODAP, and then about 5 million of that went to the Grasshopper program, which we'll talk about once we're done with the disaster conversation. So that program was again authorized, funded by the special session, and along with it came some additional staffing resources. But the main component of that program was to look back into 2021, look at lost revenue on a full farm scale, and and to try to bridge assistance to either when a USDA program would come to fruition, to come realization, or act as just a state level supplemental assistance payments to folks who may not get quite a full amount of assistance from USDA, may not even be able to access the program. Maybe they could access this one, or certainly as that bridge loan to, again, when USDA funding would start flowing. So the mechanics of it was the policy bill really looked at it. We looked at our own internal capacity, how it could function. $40 million program is not a small program. It's certainly not a small program when it's the first one we've ever done in the state, first one that we've ever worked on. And so we recognized, one, pretty quick, we cannot run an FSA style program when you're looking at crops, very specific losses. Obviously, they have a huge presence in the state, highly trained folks to do it, years of experience. And so we looked at it in terms of kind of, again, that whole farm revenue loss, and bridging to that point, and also partnering then with local lending institutions to try to make sure that folks all over the state would have, at least some sort of more local point of contact that they could go into, fill out applications, kind of get their answers, questions, versus trying to centralize it all into Salem and, just kind of having a bigger both physical distance and access barriers there. So the program itself essentially looks at a 3-year average of producers' incomes. And the years that the policy bill had are 17, 18, and 19. And 2020 was omitted because during a lot of the conversations that we had with stakeholders, it was just such a volatile year for a lot of folks that it wasn't truly a good representative of kind of that expected income that the operation could have expected in 2021 absent of natural disasters. So 17, 18, 19, taking the 3-year average there and then measuring 2021 against that average. And then essentially bringing folks up to either 90% of that delta. So bringing folks up to that 90% of their baseline, 90% of their expected income, with a cap of $125,000 in terms of payments. Then that formula changes a little bit for historically underserved producers or folks who had $350,000 in gross income based on that baseline. For the formula moves up to about $150,000 max payment, or 95% of that expected income. And the historically underserved producer is the USDA definition. So if you're familiar with that, that's what it is. And so in terms of the function of the program, how it will operate, it's almost that simple in terms of calculation. Look at your 3-year baseline, look at your 21 income measured against, find the delta. If you had greater than 5 or 10% revenue loss, you can apply. We will, work into that formula up to $125,000, $150,000 worth of payments. We have provisions, built into the application and the procedures for folks who may not have been in business, let's say in 2017 or 2018, and those types of things. And so we've been trying to calculate in all those variabilities. I think with agriculture, nothing functions and covers the entire array and diversity of agriculture, especially in a state like Oregon. No program, it's difficult to build a program like that in 3 months, let alone, well over time as well. And so, there are certainly some areas that are potentially missed or miscalculated. A lot of it is, I'll use an experience on my own, grass seed industry, right? You sell on contracts basically the year after the production. So there's a delay in terms of the realization of volume to the actual income that you receive. I'll say that's where the FSA program is able to come in really strongly. They look at that loss, those things. The federal program is certainly where most folks should go. That is the appropriate pathway. This was really that one-time look into 2021. to look at significant revenue losses, emergency revenue losses, to move those disaster payments there. And I think, we would be supported by our conversations with the caneberry growers who, when we certainly had the secretary and the governor out on that farm, there were a lot of blackberries and raspberries that were raisins still on the canes out there from that heat wave. I mean, that is a significant immediate revenue loss, and that's what this program is really looking at. The FSA, the USDA programs can take in that longer kind of picture, that more complex contracting, ability, things like that. So, in a nutshell, that is the program, and we are. I was hoping to be able to sit here today and say we're up and going, but as with many complexities with state contracting, many complexities with lending institutions, we believe we are getting our final lending institution contract signed today, and so we should be able to have an announcement tomorrow around opening up application periods and being able to move forward. It was our mission to ensure that we had statewide coverage, that we had access for everybody, starting at, roughly the same time. And so, that has been our focus moving forward. And then how the application function will process, or how the application process will go is, again, folks will be able to go into these lending institutions. They'll fill out the application, which is, it's a fairly straightforward application. There's an independent verification form. So if you have a CPA, a tax attorney, somebody that does your financials for you, they can fill it out. They can approve it. So you don't have to bring in all your tax records showing your income for the last 3 years, things like that. Streamlining that process. But then we're going to open up an application period for a month. So our target date, the ending date right now, working is going to be June 3rd is when that first application window would close. We'll get all the kind of the application reports back from the financial institutions, and then the assistance money will start being able to flow then. We did that for, kind of a funds management purpose. We don't know what the need is. We don't know the volume of applications. And, the program really wants to prioritize those, who are essentially hit the hardest, right? And so we need to, instead of paying out in real time, we're going to look at that application period. We'll be able to make payments after that. And then that way we don't oversubscribe the fund or do anything that inadvertently. We will certainly look, and we have in our contracts the ability to run subsequent application periods. If we have additional funding left over, if we don't subscribe at all, we will certainly then open up additional application opportunities. So the way the funding breaks down is out of that $40 million, we have $36 million available for direct payments to producers. And so and then the $4 million for, the administration fees, working with lenders, those types of things. And then $5 million of that is dedicated to producers inside Jefferson County. And so that way, I think there was a lot of kind of communication with the producers there around their needs. And so there was kind of, a little emphasis to make sure that, there was a little bit set aside, specifically for folks inside Jefferson County. So that's where we're at. And then I think our ask today, certainly of the board, to all the public partners who are listening, is once that announcement goes out, you guys are the best validators. You are the best mouthpieces in your community. It might not, you might not be able to take advantage of it. It might not work for you, but it might work for your neighbors. It might work for your contacts. And so, our goal at the end of the day is to move the money into the community, to get the folks who need it. And again, even if it might not work for you, FSA is a better program, right? There's a lot of options on the table. And I think that's the goal of this, is just to provide additional opportunities for folks to recover from the 2021 disasters. And so, again, our ask today of everyone is once that goes live, to be able to, help communicate, help validate it, help push all that information out. So With that, I'll stop for questions there, unless Alan, you have anything to add? Before we go to grasshoppers, and then we'll transition to grasshoppers.
Miguel Lopez, if you were a caneberry grower and you had significant loss, but you also carried crop insurance, will you be allowed to participate in this?
Good question. So if you got a crop insurance payment in 21, that's going to show up as 21 income. And so that's going to factor, right, as part of that total income that you receive that would be on your tax documents. And so it would be factored in against that 3-year baseline.
I think one thing to note on the caneberry example, we actually don't have a crop insurance policy in Oregon, so caneberry growers cannot actually purchase crop insurance today. There is a non-insured crop assistance program at FSA called NAP. They could purchase that. And I know the caneberry industry is really looking for long-term, some longer-term risk management tools. One is looking towards Farm Bill, but then also looking at a crop insurance tool. California producers have a crop insurance tool, but we don't have that available in Oregon.
So that actually reminds me, I skipped over one small piece of this program, and that is like the Rebalance repayment program. So the design of the program again was to be, to get folks to the USDA element, right? Certainly recognizing that somebody might be able to take advantage of this program, but also get potentially a good amount of assistance from USDA. And so for folks who are going to get funding from an FSA program and who get funding underneath this program, in order to get the state level funds forgiven, they're going to have, producers are going to have to essentially report back what they got in FSA disaster payments. And that essentially will then be added to your 21 income. The formula will be rebalanced, and then it'll be determined, do you owe partial back, do you owe in full back, or did you still not even get to your 90%, expected income, and you get to retain all the state and the federal payments that you had gotten. And so there's a little bit rebalance there, because the efforts there was not to duplicate, right, the federal funding efforts and to have folks, essentially at 150% of expected income, utilizing both programs. So there is that little bit of a rebalancing program. But Miguel, but one, yes, you reminded me of that little piece, but then two, I also want to be clear that the federal payments that are reported back are just on that ad hoc disaster program. So folks receiving other payments through USDA, different, or don't count inside that formula. So,
Ela Miller, could you just clarify that? So you're saying other disaster payments, like cleanup after a major, ice event, would not be included?
So like TAP or, forage payments to livestock producers, those types of things that are already in policy.
Yeah, you're thinking maybe ECP, and they would not be included in the income calculation.
Okay. And a follow-on question, if there was a federal disaster declared in and I understand your logic for not counting 2020, but if there was a federal disaster declared in 2019, which there was affecting some areas of the state that impacted production dramatically, can we at least mention that and say what 2020 income was, and just see what the lenders say and do about it? Because in a certain area, it might be very well known about that being a completely odd year. Again, understand why you went with that because of COVID, lots of reasons. But should we not even try? People are going to ask.
Sure. So if you have the tax documents for 17, 18, 19, that's what you use. 2020 is only brought in if, let's say, if you weren't in business in 2017, then you would use 18, 19, and 20. So you can't supplement 20 in for 19.
And that's in the statute. So the law would have to change to make that change.
Yeah. So that wouldn't be at discretion. That's not a discretion piece of the lenders. Yeah.
Miguel Lopez, one more question. Is this something that we're going to continue to revisit every year if we continue to see disaster after disaster?
So I'll say that the design, the intent, the implementation of the program, right, was really to supplement the uniqueness of 2021. And at the time, Congress had not authorized any funding for an ad hoc disaster program on the federal level. So that's where this was born out of. The program, current statute, the policy bill, it all sunsets in June of next year. The funding has to be reverted back after, at the biennium. So it would take new legislation and a new appropriation to continue anything like this into the future.
And I think from historically, disaster assistance has been at the federal level. And I think that's the appropriate place for it to be. And so one thing we have been talking with sectors in Oregon agriculture that maybe some of the existing federal disaster assistance programs have not worked for them is 2023 is a Farm Bill reauthorization. What changes should be happening and making sure we're elevating those changes to our federal delegation? Where do changes to crop insurance that maybe some of those products don't work for our producers? And then making sure our producers know that there are some risk management tools out there for them, and that is the first step in managing, I think, some weather and climate volatility that we're going to be continuing to see. Today, the state has money to invest in this program, but we will be in tight budget years again when we don't. And so I don't think we should be planning on that, and making sure the federal programs work for our type of agriculture should be our priority once we get through kind of this emergency ad hoc program from the state's perspective.
Elin Miller, one other question. To your point, would it make any sense for a future Board of Ag meeting that we could have kind of a basic 101 on where the gaps may be in the federal versus programs for specialty crops? I think that would be helpful for a lot of us.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great suggestion.
And I will mention that Oregon's FSA director was just recently appointed, Gail Greenman, and so we do now have an FSA director appointed into that position. So it'll be a good conduit, good ability to get those programs up and running. Oh, well, by all means, Alan. I'll fill in.
I'll be the pretty face sitting up here. So thank you. Chair Harper, Director Taylor, and the board. So my name's Alan Hansen. I'm newly with the Department of Agriculture. As Jonathan mentioned, the legislature's awarded $5 million for grasshopper and Mormon cricket suppression. Approximately 1.2 million of that will be going to the administrative costs, and 3.8 will be going to reimbursements. And the way the program works, it's a two-step process. The first step is if you're a landowner that has a cricket or grasshopper issue, you would contact the state Department of Ag, notify that you have the issue. The department will come out and they'll do an assessment of your property to identify if there's an economic level of infestation, which is equivalent to, I believe, about 8 crickets or more, or crickets or grasshoppers per square yard. And if that's the case, they'll recommend a suppression plan. And based on that suppression plan, if you treat in accordance with that plan, you're eligible for reimbursement. So once you do that, you would apply with the Department of Ag. We have forms. At this point, we don't know what the reimbursement rate is. To be able to use that entire $3.8 million, what we've done is we've said we're going to split that amongst the total number of acres that apply. So if we get, let's say, 500,000 acres, based on the amount, that's going to be a reimbursement of approximately $7. And we've got a fact sheet here with a graph so you can kind of see what that rate will be. But this is, I guess we've done this program years and years ago, but we don't have any current data, so we really don't have a great understanding of what the need is out there at this point. And so once, like I said, once you treat, you would apply with the state, and we've set it up so that individuals can apply, or if there's a group of individuals, say a co-op wants to treat on behalf of a group of farmers, they can do that as long as each of the areas treated has an assessment from the state. Because what we're doing is we're verifying that the treatment was done in accordance with the state plan to address the greatest need. And then once that application's submitted, we'll be making the payments internally. So applications need to be submitted by August 1st. So we're giving ourselves a couple months to be able to turn those around depending on the number of individuals that apply. And so that's basically the program. Do you have any inputs?
Yeah, I think I would just, through the chair and the board, Jonathan Sanda, I think just to unpack a little bit further though, the 1.2 million is also funding a lot of our seasonal workers who are out there doing the survey work. They're the folks doing a lot of that data assessment that feed into those plans and then kind of prescribe the suppression work and effort. Yeah, and we are anchoring that cost share program to an ODA suppression plan. The USDA does a similar type of a program on federal lands and around, what the work that they do. This is going to be really focused on the private lands and trying to do that. And the critical timing here too is that the suppression work is most effective when they're juveniles, when they're aggressively out there eating away. And so that's why this timing is working as right now in the spring. And then it is an ad hoc cost share program. So you got to do the treatment. You got to know kind of what it's going to cost, how many acres you've treated, and then submit for that cost share component of it. So it's a very receipts based program. It's not going to be, we're not able to float anybody at funds for suppression work and then try to figure it out, on the back end.
This is Alan. One piece I forgot to mention. It's a cost share program, so we're going to reimburse up to a maximum of 75% of your costs. So we're not going to cover 100%.
And by way of context of why this was included in the December emergency package is we were hearing a lot after last year with the drought impacts, right? We're going into what it's going to look like another very dry year, likely a drought. We have many counties already declared a drought in Oregon, several of them. And when you have dry conditions, less forage, and then you have an infestation of grasshoppers or morbid crickets, so suddenly the forage that is there that the cattle need, they're competing with these infestations. And so that's why it was really looped into this package. One other thing I wanted to highlight is there are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some sensitive sites like sage grouse habitat is outside of they are not able to be treated for other environmental reasons. They will not be able to be included in this.
And this is Alan again. This is a suppression program. These animals are indigenous to Oregon, so we're not trying to eradicate them. It's just a suppression to keep them below that economic level of infestation.
Yeah, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our board work session for the 2023 Board of Agriculture Industry Report. Carla has also offered us an example of our 2021 report.
So if you turn to tab 12 as well, Carla had put just a short blurb in your book on just a reminder what the report is. It is to the governor and it's really target audience of the legislature. Think about it as a state of kind of Oregon agriculture, main challenges, main opportunities, main issues before the collective Oregon agriculture. We revised this pretty significantly a couple years ago. It used to be a book, and we went to a more user-friendly format for legislators. They don't have time to sit down and read 30 pages. And this has actually been really well received. I think some of the things, we work on this and draft this. We will pull in some new data from the 2017 Census of Agriculture and the OSU economic look. So some of this data and things we will just automatically update, but just look at some of the key themes and issues, some of those industry trends. Are these still the right ones? We're just looking for some initial feedback so we can start crafting a draft for the board to review.
Elin Miller, I was just wondering, is there any, and maybe it's in here, but there was some significant change that was debated in 2021 and then passed in 2022 that affects farm labor. And in light of California and Washington being kind of ahead of us, and I'm talking about ag overtime, is there something that, again, it's going to be a continuing impact on us, and should our report reflect in some statistical way challenges that agriculture is having with labor?
So one of the things, just looking, maybe taking a step back from that discrete issue, is when you look at the key issues, the ones that in the last board report that were identified are water, agricultural workforce, land use, and market access and market development. We also did a portion about COVID-19 and wildfire impacts, because this was being written in 2020. And so we kind of did a preliminary look. So I think as you're looking at the impacts of ag labor, potentially ag overtime, those types of issues, I would say that's where in that agricultural workforce, we may want to, I think that it fits under that theme, and we can certainly incorporate some of that. I think it's probably too early in a lot of ways to know exactly some statistical, like what's going to actually happen, but we can certainly bring in some of that theme here, or some of that verbiage under this agricultural workforce theme.
To look, say anticipate this may, and we need to look at it. Okay, thank you.
Barbara Boyer, I'm wondering if we want to add a header of climate somewhere. I don't know what it looks like, but just seems to be kind of across the board. It's pretty, so.
So you may want to think about, just suggestion for the board, if you wanted to do one of the issues as climate and have water as a subset of that climate kind of theme, I guess.
Barbara Boyer, can we get new pictures, please?
So one thing we will look at is if we can bring in a photographer. So ODOT typically, for those new board members, usually did our headshots. But they're no longer doing that. So we may look to see if there's someone when we're in August at our meeting, wherever that is. I think we're talking about Ontario, but the board needs to confirm that if somebody can come over and do headshots. So.
I can hear you, Eric.
Yeah.
Randy Savati, I think looking at this, the COVID-19, the wildfire impacts, kind of thinking back to, what really affected Oregon ag, and I'm speaking from the west side here, west side helped me out a little bit, but, you're looking at Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon, we are fighting the drought really bad. It is a heavy, heavy load for us right now. It's a heavy impact. And so I think that's something definitely we need to look at and highlight for sure.
Alexis Taylor. Yeah, as if the board wanted to move towards a climate with water, and I think how I think about it is a compounding natural disasters that we've really experienced from 2020, 2021, already 2022, right? We got snow and freeze in April, and huge wine impacts on the wine industry potentially is what we're hearing in the Willamette Valley. So I think that kind of volatility in the climate, historic drought, multiple year drought, I think it definitely would could make sense under a climate bucket if the
Yeah.
board was interested in that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that, I mean, because you're right. Yeah, I mean, it is more than water. I mean, the wind that we're facing and everything else, the crop destruction we're seeing due to wind and everything in Eastern Oregon is significant. I think worth kind of trying to fill a bigger bucket with that.
Barbara Boyer, and I really like this new format coming from one of the senior board members that was part of the big report, and the legislators that I know, they really, really appreciate this. And I also hear back from them how much they appreciate the quarterly newsletter that we went to when we changed format. So I really like this. And it's they like it. It's very easy and to the point.
And it's pretty.
Stacy Simonich, I'd just say I really like the breakout by region / county. Really appreciate seeing some of the data in that way.
Ela Miller, one other thought. Given the disaster program that is being implemented now, granted this may be for future, but is there a way to quantify again, the impacts and implications that collectively, you have the climate, and if you talk about all those subsets, but again, agriculture's facing a lot more than we've faced in the past, and so is there, some way to loop that concept in? And it may, again, be for future reports.
I don't know if I exactly follow.
So if part of the application, I mean, it's showing the quantification. I mean, different subsets of different commodities have talked about different impacts, but I'm not sure it's been collectively looked at, especially over time. And I'm just wondering if, in light of the applications that are going in on that, would there be more data to show? Anyway, I throw that out just as for the first time we'll have some additional information potentially.
Got it. Yeah, I think we will certainly know what the disaster, our program serviced. I think also we may be able to talk to FSA and see if they can quantify some of the state level data from 2020, 2021, and we can see how we could incorporate that into this report, or even board newsletters going forward as another avenue to kind of share that.
Just trying to think of something, a lot of these are based around land use, water. And this is just a thought bubble, I guess, at this point is, I think not only do we have the drought and everything, but the other thing that's impacting it is, the supply chain, cost of goods. Essentially, multiple hats that I wear as a banker and a farmer, I'm seeing it at all ends. And that's something that I will say probably the water's big. You have to have water to grow a crop, but how then do you fertilize that crop when their fertilizer is not available? That's really hitting the bottom line and impacting many, many of our family farms. So something that we can maybe tie that in the economic impact that we're having right now.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And again, this is to set up the legislature going into session, right, on what are the issues Oregon agriculture have been experiencing and where are some of the challenges and opportunities. So I think we may want to even think about, I just suggest, we've talked about redoing climate, putting water under climate, some changes to the agricultural workforce. Maybe you want to create a fifth around supply chain challenges, because I don't know anyone in agriculture in Oregon or across the country who are not experiencing something or challenges associated with it. So that's a great suggestion. If the board is interested, we can flesh out a fifth one to look at as one of these kind of key issues before Oregon agriculture. One other suggestion I wanted to mention is, if the board's still interested in keeping that market access, market development one, I think we have some interesting information we could pull forward around the state meat inspection. We will have, done some awards. We'll have we'll have an inspection program up and running, and that, as we're thinking about the supply chain challenges, some of the issues with COVID-19, that showed some lack of resiliency in our supply chain, and that's really what is spurred state meat inspection, is bringing more resiliency into our supply chain. We may want to incorporate that here, whether that's in the market access, market development portion, or the supply chain, because I think that is something that is a big workload for us as an agency. But really, the state has said we want to invest in this from the producer perspective to the consumer perspective.
Barbara Boyer. So, we've been talking about the key issues, but this other part, it's about the Oregon federally recognized tribes and then COVID-19 and wildfire. Did I hear you say you wanted to keep the COVID-19 and wildfire section and update it?
Well, and it could be disaster generally. And I think it's going to be a continuation of disaster sorts of stuff. So
I like that idea. And then did we want to keep the tribal section? Oh, I'm not seeing any heads. Sorry, I wasn't looking.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. I was reading it. Okay, good. Thank you.
If there are no other comments, I think that gives us a good place to start. And we will have a draft by the next board meeting for board members to look at, react to, give feedback on. So thank you for that.
All right, well, I guess we'll move on to board business, and we'll begin with ODA program area reports.
So these are the written reports that you received. This is just your opportunity if you had any specific questions from that program report that we provided. We were happy to try to answer them in this place.
Barbara Boyer, just thanks for writing them. I read them, and I'm always impressed about all the work that gets done. So, thank you.
It's okay if there's not any questions.
Okay, we'll move on to Barbara on the OWEB report.
Barbara Boyer. So I'm your rep on the ODA rep, or the Board of Ag rep on OWEB. And we had our meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago, virtual. And with our new climate resolution, OWEB board has never done a resolution. So this was our first, I think I mentioned it last time, our first resolution was on climate and the lens we're going to have when we review applications. It's not really been vetted yet. We're still doing some listening sessions around the state on what it might look like in the application process. And with that being said, the board decided that we will only do 1 in-person meeting and 3 virtual every year. So that was interesting. So since at that meeting, the legislators did fund the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, OAHP, and I am the OWEB rep on the OAHC, which is the commission. And so we are now about to do a very heavy lift because we are rolling out the program, and we've had 1 meeting, and we will be meeting monthly while we figure this new process. One of the interesting parts because I think we've worked on this with the legislators for 4 years, so it was very nice that we got a $5 million funding to roll it out. We did an ask before when we went to legislatures the first time, what the interest would be in the state. And I mean, there's a lot of interest, and we can tap into the federal funds if we have a state-run conservation or working land easement program. So that's the exciting part. So yes, 5 million, but then there's matching funds from, and I'm not sure of the percentage, but there is matching federal funds. So stay tuned to those updates. And let's see, OWEB is hiring 7 new positions to put them up to 46 FTE, which is, it's one of the smaller agencies, but gaining ground. And then we're doing some DEI training. So before every board meeting, we have an hour and a half of DEI training that we'll be doing for the next 2 years. So it's been really interesting. And, to me, it's tough to do DEI training virtually, especially with board members I've never met before. So and we're finding some challenges there, but we're we're plowing through. And I think that's all I had. Did I miss anything? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. If there's no questions or comments for Barbara, we'll move on to our resolutions that we worked on Tuesday. So we'll start with Group A. Elin.
Okay, Elin Miller, and please, other members of the board chime in too as I attempt to summarize. So first of all, the priority for agriculture use of water 107, we received some public comments that enhanced number 3 and number 4, and that we are going to incorporate and have those go back out for public comment. So that's the status of that, to basically keep active and have that go back out for public comment, that we'll look at trying to have closure at our August meeting for that one. The second one is a conservation plan for Oregon Coast Coho 281. Thanks to the ODA staff, they did an update for that because it was a lot of, let's just say, historic information, but a lot has happened since then for the Coho program and what's been going on. The input from the board was to ensure, because we didn't have the exact language during the meeting. So again, this will be going back out so we can look at this exact language and take a chance, have a chance for the public to review all that and get any additional public comment. But I think the main factor is this resolution is around all the work that's gone into looking at voluntary work to improve the situation with coho. And so we just want to make sure that that's emphasized appropriately in it. So that was the comments surrounding that. We also suggested, because there was some question on different terminology, whether we call it, in recovery or recovery ready or whatever for the species, that we would invite ODFW to come to a future meeting to really talk to us about the progress that has or has not been made on dealing with the coho situation. So that was a suggestion that the group had as well. And so again, stay active, work in progress. The next two, and this is a coordination streamside management approach to water quality 309. And well, I'll do that one first. We had just very minor edits that had occurred last time when we presented. And so we will be asking the board for approval of that, resolution at this meeting. There were no additional public comments provided, and we felt pretty darn good about it last time around, and that was reflected in the minutes. As well as resolution number 313, which was the water quality strategic implementation. And I think the only change on that was that we spelled out TMDL, or I might be getting that wrong on the previous one, but that was it. And again, at our last meeting, we were really comfortable. We received no additional public comment on it. So we're saying, let's just move forward on that one. And then I guess we can come back to that, Mr. Chairman. But then the final one is climate change focus, climate change policy considerations. We received public comments on that not necessarily, well, we're providing different perspective. And what we wanted to do was hear the public comment during this meeting and be able to make that a consideration, as well as certainly what we just talked about with a climate smart opportunity. And so that's going to be kept open for additional public comment. We haven't made any revisions to that yet because we wanted to hear the public comment today. So we'll be working on that at our next meeting for the workshop for that. So that's the summary. And I don't know if there's questions first, and then I'd be happy to make a motion to move forward on those two resolutions. And if there's any other comments from other board members.
I was part of Group A, and I don't have any. That was very well summarized. So I guess, yeah, if anybody else has any questions or comments on those resolutions, we're looking to approve. So then I'll entertain a motion.
So I'd move for approval of Resolution 309 and 313 with the edits that had been presented earlier. And again, there was no additional public comment.
Okay. And do we want to do those individually, or can we do them as a group? Okay. We'll do them just individually, one at a time.
All right. Then we'll start with 309.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving Resolution 309, say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Oh, Jen's on, good. Okay.
And so the second one, move to approve is, of course, my phone went blank and my fingerprint isn't working well, is resolution number 313.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elin. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, Eric seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving Resolution 313, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Aye.
Thank you, Chad. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elin. All right, we'll move on to Group B.
Okay. We'll start with Resolution 301, minimizing conflict and coexistence in ag. We had brief discussion on that, went through some public comment on it that urged us to move forward with it as it's written. The board agreed with that. We did talk about kind of just some language in there about what is defined as legal technologies, and had some just some basic definitions around that. We also talked about how it would help within the Willamette Valley and the canola growing, and how this resolution really can help with those types of situations. In the end, with the public comment and the board's discussion, we propose to move that resolution forward for approval with the board. Resolution 307, farm market housing, we did table that discussion. We had very little discussion on it, tabled it for the presentation that we had at this meeting. 317, the Oregon Department of Ag's FSMA implementation. Again, we had some basic conversation about that. We decided to table it till we had the presentations at this meeting. 318, siting of energy transmission and general facilities on ag land. Quite a bit of Jim, I think Jim Johnson, he did an amazing job putting this together for us and adding some comments and really updating, especially where LCDC has come in with this, kind of updating the past language that was in there to update it to what they're actually doing now. Added a paragraph in here, what the LCDC is actually doing and how they've developed the rules for that. And then some small changes there. The board, we did ask that we add in a new section in there where ODA is involved in the conversations and continues to evaluate and monitor the effectiveness as well. And so we have decided to wait until we see that language before we move it to the board, but for approval. But all the changes that we saw that Jim presented were good, and we appreciated that. So I think at this time, just a motion to move Resolution 301 forward.
All right, there's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion?
Elin Miller, sorry. Second.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of moving to approve Resolution 301, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
Aye.
Thank you, Chad.
Mr. Chairman, Elin Miller, just a question. In light of the presentation that we had on whether or not Oregon wants to go forward on the and I'll call it delegation for lack of a better term for the FDA FSMA stuff, timing wise, because I was hearing, okay, we've got until March of 2023. But I think the time frame we saw was if we were to apply by July of 2022, our board meeting is obviously August. And I don't know, again, from a board standpoint of any further discussion or timing of that, because I think that resolution is, you know, supportive, but could go further if we wanted to actually, as a board, state this was a good idea or not. And I don't know how we would approach that process-wise if we wanted to or not.
So I'm not fully following the July of 2022.
So I thought on the charts that we saw, it was kind of a time frame that if you applied here, it would take some time, but the sooner you applied, probably the better to then get in place the transition between federal audit versus state. And so
Yeah. So I would say we, with some of the conversations that Susanna also mentioned that we were doing
with the commodities
through the summer, before our next board meeting, we will not have decided as an agency if we are going forward to request the second part, part A, maybe, part B, I can't keep them, sorry. By the next boarding meeting. We will not have made that decision, I do not believe, since we really do have until March of 23 under this funding round. And we want to have some additional stakeholder outreach, engagement, and conversations. So I think the board has time. One thing process-wise, we can meet as a work group in between, virtually, between now and the August meeting. So maybe we will do that, is do a host a virtual meeting of the work group to start the conversation, see what edits you may have on that resolution, answer some additional questions. So when we meet in August, there will have been a draft if the work group wants to bring forward any changes or not to the full board.
Excellent, thank you, because I think it's timely, so appreciate that.
Luisa Santa Maria, why do you think you won't be ready by August? What is taking you to decide or not you're going to go or not for?
I think it's the stakeholder conversations. I think we have started them. Honestly, we were planning to do these in 2020, but they were the type of conversations we believed in person were really important. And so they were delayed. I think we would have potentially be in a different spot to say yes or no. Right. But we wanted to have these conversations in person, so they've just restarted this year. So I think some of those commodity-specific outreach and conversations then based upon some of that outreach is an important component. And then obviously also I think the board, I want the board to have an opportunity to weigh in to say, is this a path you want us to go down or continue to wait and only focus on that outreach, education, technical assistance?
Because one of the things I'm seeing right now is what would be the difference? You know, what would be the advantage even you're going to be still under FDA?
So from an agency perspective, there would be a huge difference. It's going to be additional workload. It's going to be a large additional workload. So and I think from the grower perspective, there will be a difference as well on the actual inspection side. You would be dealing with a ODA inspector as opposed to an FDA inspector from more than likely out of state. So I think there are some very real differences. What we inspect to, what those standards are, that is not different. That is the federal standard. But there will be a difference certainly for us as an agency and also I think for growers.
More work for ODA.
And I'll just step in just real quick. Randy Savati, kind of talking in growers in my area, you know, we are part of this. And so I think one of the things that we're really concerned with is that budgeting. You know, do we have enough money to truly implement this as an ODA? Whereas, you know, if they pull that funding and we have to go to a fee-based system, is that something that we want? And I'm not saying that we don't. I mean, onion growers, I've had several conversations, and I think Suzanne kind of made the comment that we're seeing a shift in the grower base where they wanted the FDA to actually, they're maybe possibly changing that decision and maybe wanting the ODA to take on this. But I think there is that, you know, when you put it in the producer's hands and all of a sudden they have to pay a fee for this that they're required to do, it's just a question that they have.
Good point,
All right.
So Chair Harper, before we move on, I have an ask of this board that might go in the newsletter. So I wanted to bring this up first. So in lieu of the $2 million that ODA got for the meat processing, and then they're going to the e-board to ask for another 2 million, if not more. I'm wondering if you guys are, how you feel about us writing a letter in support of the additional 2 million or more. I mean, I would like that wording in there. So I just wanted to check in with you guys and see how you felt about that.
Supportive, Elon Miller. Yeah.
Miguel Lopez, I support that.
Do we want to vote or consensus?
What do you want?
Just vote, it's easier.
Okay, yeah, true.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
All right, there's a motion.
So moved. Elon Miller.
Second.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So any discussion on the motion? See, our hearing none. All those in favor of writing a letter in support of that extra 2 million, say aye.
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 2 million or more.
Or more.
Excuse me. Hopefully, howdy. Yeah, 2 million more. All right.
And then I neglected an OWEB. Sorry, did you want to go on to that? I forgot to mention something about OWEB, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I think, so we will draft a letter. We will share it with Chair Harper and get his signature. I would envision the board will send it to me. So then we can bring this forward when we're before the e-board, as opposed to sending it to anyone else. I think it's just simplest to send it to me. Awesome. That works for the board.
Thank you. And just quickly, we did approve 53 grants. We had 100 grants in open solicitation for OWEB, and 53 were funded at $9 million. So that was, yeah, really amazing projects. So there's a lot of interest out there.
Excellent.
Thanks.
All right.
Harper?
Yes. Chad?
Just while the topic of the meat grant came up, I sit on that committee, and we were all issued about 10 applications to review, and then we met here a few days ago after we submitted our thoughts on them, and there was about 6 or 7 that kind of came to the top, and then we had some conversations about some others, how they laid out in the list of priorities, and there was about, trying to remember whether it was 11 or 17 million dollars worth of ask, and so it's kind of been a challenge to prioritize all of those, and the ones that we do have at the top of the list now have a pretty good geographic representation of all the different areas in Oregon. And we're going to meet again tomorrow and see if we can't fine tune that some more to get down to the ones that we would then send to Alexis that she can choose from. So definitely a huge need out there, and a lot of applications came in, which is good in one respect, but certainly challenging to kind of get through them and see which ones are really going to be able to meet the needs that Oregon has.
Chairman, Elon Miller, in light of what Chad is just saying, I'm just wondering if the specificity, I don't know if it's appropriate to give the universe as we do the or more description. Sounds like that information would be very compelling as part of our letter.
Well, thank you, Chad. Yeah, it's definitely, I think that'll certainly help. Yeah, that'll sound good in the letter for sure. I guess with that, we'll move on to newsletter topics. Sounds like we've got one there to start with.
Everybody looking at me.
Yeah.
Barbara Boyer. I think the FSMA, I'd really like to see that because, you know, it's definitely in motion and there's decisions to be made. So
One question, would the board like to hold that until the resolution work gets done? So the board actually has whatever the position the board that comes out of that? Just food for thought.
great suggestion.
Yes.
I support that.
Ready, Savati, just can we add, do they have those dates confirmed of the in-person visits to Ontario and the different grower groups that Suzanne was talking about?
They just start to do that in April, last week, I think so. There's next one in Hood River, and I think the last one is the.
Yeah.
So just
I'm
a
just wondering,
reminder.
do we just throw those in the newsletter?
So just a reminder, the purpose of the newsletter, the primary audience is the legislature.
Right.
So it's not necessarily, I mean, others get it, but the primary audience is it's the legislature. And so I think we certainly you could, however, I'm sorry. Oh, I think about it with that lens of like, is that the target audience to know about those necessarily, or is it the outcome?
Right. I was just thinking, here's the progress that we're making if we wanted to do something. But yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. Elin Miller, ODAP, in light of the fact that that's rolling out, it was approved by the legislature and yeah.
You may want to mention the new dean.
That's a great idea.
Great idea.
Really important.
Another suggestion could be, since there was such a water quality focus, with an update, you did the tour, talk about first tour back out, first tour for many of the board. I'd be interested what you learned, what we saw. We could talk about that.
And Elin Miller, do we we pass, continuation of resolutions? Is that an automatic thing in the newsletter?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Carla, is that enough?
All right, excellent. So before we adjourn, we need to figure out a location, agree on a location for August. I guess we've spoken about it, but we haven't really agreed yet. So that way Carla can get working on everything for us.
Randy, Swati, I would sure love to have you guys in Ontario. It's been a while since ODA has been over. I have a lot that I want to show you, so I would really love if you guys would come to Ontario.
That's great. I like Ontario.
I haven't been in Ontario.
I guess we're gonna find out.
And you can fly.
Yes, I can. Sounds like a good excuse to me.
Maybe I see a shuttle.
Yeah, Chairman Harper, how many seats do you have on? Anyway.
Not enough.
Ontario it is.
Yeah, sounds like Ontario. Right. Well, is there any other board business to cover? We cover it all? Okay, well, on that note, meeting adjourned. Holy cow.
Great job. Good job.
Thank
you.
Yes.
Wow.
And there's lunch.